Stop acting obsolete, Debbie. It's just alignment paint and numbers. Brent Halverson's finger stopped 2 inches from her face, stiff and pale under the sodium fixtures, and the clinker grinding hall swallowed his words, multiplied them in steel, and threw them back at everyone in earshot. The line was already running its dawn cadence, the low rotary thunder from the feed chute, the grind chamber's steady roar, the high whine from the number 3 finish mill drivetrain, climbing and dipping with load. At 5:40 a.m., Red Mesa Cement sounded like a machine that never slept and never forgave mistakes. Debbie Thompson stood beside the operator console with a tablet in one hand and her hearing protection hanging around her neck, her jaw set, her shoulders square, and she felt the room turn toward her, the way a crowd turns toward a person who has just been called out in public. 2 control room operators pretended to keep reading the trend screens. A maintenance mechanic on grease rounds froze with his rag in hand. Even the radio traffic seemed to pause for half a second, then resume, in short clipped bursts from dispatch and truck queue control. Debbie had seen Brent choose audiences for conflict before. He worked conflicts like meetings, timing them to shift change, choosing words that landed hard, and framing every technical objection as personality weakness. From what Debbie had watched him do, he seemed to count on production pressure to finish the job once he made an expert sound timid. Debbie looked past him at the vibration panel because she trusted instruments more than posture. The CMS indicator for the outboard bearing on the high-speed gearbox was solid red, and the alarm banner still flashed coupling drift trend deviation. She had brought him there to show him the data and request an immediate controlled slowdown pending alignment verification. She had expected pushback. She had not expected to be treated like she had forgotten how rotating equipment worked after 19 years on heavy drives. Her voice stayed even anyway. It is not paint and numbers. It is shaft centerline geometry under thermal growth. If we miss that window, we load the bearing wrong. Brent gave a short laugh that was half snort, half performance. There it is. The lecture. Every week you've got a new reason we can't run at rate. Not every week, she said. Today, this train. Today, tomorrow, always. You are paid to keep this place moving, not to baby old equipment. She held the tablet up so he could see the overlaid trend. This wasn't old equipment noise. This was drift. It stepped in the last 24 hours, and it stepped again in the last hour. You can see the phase angle change. He barely glanced at it. I see colors and squiggles. That squiggle is load, finding an edge. His expression sharpened, then flattened into something colder. You know what I see? I see a specialist who makes a 6-figure salary and still panics over housekeeping details. The insult landed heavier than shouting would have. She had heard men like him use the same formula in 3 plants over 2 decades. Dismiss the signal, reduce the mechanism to something trivial, make caution look like fear. She had never gotten used to the sting. She had fought for every certification she had, fought through shutdown nights, startup calls at 2 a.m., and years where proving competence meant doing the job and then proving she had done it right to people who had not watched. She did not need praise. She did need authority to apply the rules that prevented preventable failures. Brent leaned in again, voice low enough to sound controlled, loud enough for the room. You're becoming the bottleneck. People are saying it. People, she repeated because she wanted him to name someone. Operations, planning, finance, pick a department. She set the tablet on the console and opened the work order screen so he could see the deferred task in black text. Time-stamped 18 months earlier, then deferred again and again through quarter closes and peak dispatch weeks. The laser alignment plus base regroup should have been done at OEM interval. It wasn't. We carried risk. Now the risk is speaking. He waved it off with open contempt. You love that phrase. Risk is speaking. This is a cement mill, Debbie, not a laboratory. We don't shut down because a sensor had feelings. The mechanic near the door looked down at his boots. Nobody smiled. Brent's sarcasm never invited laughter. It demanded submission. Debbie could feel heat rising in her chest, but anger in a plant was a luxury that cost time and clarity. She breathed once through her nose and kept to mechanism. Misalignment starts as nuisance vibration, then it shifts to axial loading where it doesn't belong. Then oil film thins. Then metal touches metal. Once you cross that line, no memo or meeting can reverse it. Drama, Brent said, pure drama. Physics, same thing the way you tell it. Radio chatter cracked across the desk unit. Dispatch to mill control, confirm truck wave alpha holds. Penalty clock starts at 1200 if loadout falls below contract floor. One of the operators acknowledged without turning around. The words sat in the air like a secondary manager, invisible and relentless. Penalty clock, contract floor, quarterly tonnage. Brent seemed to hear those phrases as command authority. Debbie heard them as exactly why bad decisions got made in plain sight. He stepped back and raised his voice for the room. Let me make this simple. We are behind. We are not taking number 3 down because Debbie thinks alignment paint is a prophecy. She can log her concern and move on. She answered at normal volume, which made him sound louder and less stable by contrast. I already logged concern. I requested controlled operation until we inspect feet, grout, and coupling offset. He looked at her as if she had insulted him personally. You requested slowdown at dawn dispatch. Do you understand what that costs? Yes. No, you don't. It costs trust, contracts, and jobs. Your caution has a body count too. It's just delayed, so you can pretend it isn't yours. That sentence found its target. Debbie felt it hit and stay. She knew what delayed cost looked like. She knew exactly how often maintenance was blamed for visible downtime and never credited for avoided disasters. She knew the arithmetic of prevention was invisible until failure made it obvious. But hearing him weaponize job loss against a safety call lit a line in her that would not move. My caution keeps people from getting hurt by machines that do not care about targets. Brent's upper lip tightened. There it is again. Catastrophe language. You brought me here for judgment. That is my judgment. I brought you here to fix problems, not create them. Reporting drift is fixing. Refusing rate is sabotage. She held his gaze. I did not refuse work. I refused denial. That drew a few quick glances from the crew. Brent noticed and immediately shifted tactics, from ridicule to rank. You're not in charge of production priorities. I'm in charge of mechanical reality when I sign off on equipment condition. You're in charge of what I assign you. The hall noise surged as feed momentarily increased and the drive whine climbed. Debbie felt the vibration through her boots, a thin, high-frequency tremor that did not belong in a stable train. She knew this sensation. She had felt it before cracked pedestals, before shattered couplings, before expensive men in clean shirts, asked why nobody told them sooner. She had told them sooner every time. Brent pointed toward the stairwell to the floor office. Here is what happens next. You stop freezing this operation with your fear. You clear the run, or you can hand in your badge and explain to payroll why you're too lazy to do the job you demanded top dollar to do. The word lazy was the one that finally made her flinch. Not outwardly, but deep enough that she felt her pulse in her throat. Lazy. After 19 years of call-outs, shut-down weekends, and crawling under hot housings with feeler gauges while everyone else went home. Lazy, because she would not counterfeit certainty for convenience. He had used obsolete first, then bottleneck, then sabotage, then lazy. An escalation ladder he climbed whenever data cornered him. She took a breath and chose each word. You can question my judgment. You cannot question my work ethic. I just did. Then document it. He gave a hard smile. Gladly. For a moment, neither moved. The operators kept their eyes on screens that reflected red and amber bars across their faces. Dust floated through angled light from the clear story windows. The mill kept turning. The plant kept making money 1 ton at a time, while 2 people argued about whether tomorrow would still have a machine to run. Brent broke eye contact first and snatched the radio off the cradle. Control, this is Halverson. Mark number 3 available at standard rate. Remove any self-imposed restrictions not tied to hard trip. Repeat. Standard rate. He released transmit and handed the radio back with a deliberate click. Problem solved. Debbie did not answer immediately. She watched the trend line stutter upward by a small increment, as if the system itself had heard him and objected in numbers. She felt the old familiar split inside industrial work. Keep peace and carry guilt, or hold line and absorb retaliation. She knew which side she lived on, even when it cost. I need witness acknowledgement that I advised against unrestricted run. You need to stop hiding behind paperwork. Paperwork is memory when people start rewriting history. He stared at her, then laughed once, without humor. You really think you're the hero in this story? She met that with the calm she used when setting laser targets in heat shimmer. No. I think I'm the one who will still have timestamps when this gets reviewed. That got under his skin more than any technical term had. He stepped close again, voice clipped. Do your job or get off the floor. The phrase snapped through the hall clear as a breaker trip. It was the old factory verdict for anyone who treated limits as real. Debbie felt the humiliation, the anger, and the thin edge of fear all at once, and still she did not look away. Behind Brent, the red alarm on the CMS remained lit, patient and indifferent, like a warning light in a storm that did not need belief to be true. She reached for her tablet, opened the log field, and started typing with steady hands, while the mill train sang its strained metallic note into the morning. Her thumbs moved across the tablet glass, while the mill note climbed half a tone and settled again, a strained metallic thread woven through the broader roar of the grinding hall. She entered the line exactly the way procedure required, without adjectives, without anger. Coupling drift alarm active. Outboard, HSG, bearing vibration 1.32 inches per second, RMS at 0541 RR, spot temperature 96 degrees Celsius. Recommend restricted operation max 62 revolutions per minute, pending laser alignment verification, saw foot check, base grout inspection, coupling face/runout confirmation. She added witness names from the room, attached the live trend screenshot, and hit submit before anyone could claim the warning had stayed verbal. At 5:43 a.m., she opened a second field and logged what mattered in audits. Management direction to continue standard rate operation despite recommendation. She did not editorialize. She referenced radio traffic ID and console channel. Process memory, she always called it. Not paperwork for its own sake, but an operational black box when recollection became self-defense. The console emitted a short double tone as the CMS trend refreshed. The red tag stayed pinned to GBX3OBVIB. She zoomed the chart and watched the slope, not the instantaneous number. That was where newer operators made their first mistake, chasing peaks and ignoring direction. A single spike could be noise. A slope with phase drift was mechanism. The waveform window showed a repeating axial component rising with load changes, and the 1x running speed line had widened into a blunt crest instead of a tight line. Energy smear. Motion where rotation should have stayed clean. She held the tablet out toward the nearest operator, Evan Ruiz, who had 10 years in control but almost no field alignment experience. Pull last 30 days and overlay phase. Evan glanced at Brent first, then back at the screen, then entered the command. Overlay up. The historical line appeared in blue under the live red trace. The divergence looked small to untrained eyes, only a handful of tenths. To Debbie it looked like the beginning of debt collection. "See this shoulder right here?" she said, pointing with her gloved finger to the chart at yesterday's afternoon load step. That's when the machine stopped behaving like one shaft train. It started negotiating against itself. Evan swallowed. Could be sensor drift. Could be, she said, calm and exact. So we verify with independent measurements and don't run blind. She turned to him. Give me manual speed hold at current set point for 4 minutes. I need stable data. Brent was still close enough to hear, but for the moment he did not interrupt. He was on his phone, jaw tight, speaking in low-clipped phrases about truck commitments and noon penalties. Debbie had seen that expression before, too. A man doing mental arithmetic with other people's risk. 4 minutes of stable speed gave her what she needed. The axial velocity did not settle. It ratcheted with each small torque fluctuation from the mill feed. She opened the spectral panel and marked a screenshot. Then she took the handheld infrared camera from the charging dock, signed it out under her badge ID, and nodded toward the stairwell to Evan. Come with me, I want eyes on the pedestal. The descent to the drive deck carried them from fluorescent hum into heat, dust, and vibration that traveled through steel grating into knees and hips. The number 3 train stretched along the platform like a lesson diagram in rotating equipment failure. 6.6 kilovolt motor, high-speed flexible coupling, speed increasing gearbox, intermediate shaft to pinion, then the giant girth gear wrapped around the mill shell. Under normal alignment, each component shared load within design margins. Under offset and angular error with a compromised base, load migrated to edges, and edges always punished optimism. Debbie crouched by the outboard gearbox pedestal and swept the IR camera across the housing in a slow arc, then held on the bearing cap. 96 degrees Celsius flashed in amber numerals, then 96.4, then back to 96 even. Ambient on adjacent casing was 79. A 17-degree differential at this operating state was not nuisance heat. It was friction and shear, oil film thinning under concentrated load. She spoke loud enough for Evan and the mechanic arriving behind them, Jana Pritchard, to hear through hearing protection. Thermal map confirms elevated outboard bearing temperature. Localized. Not whole box heat soak. Local problem. Jana knelt beside her and touched 2 fingers near, not on, the cap. Feels sharper than yesterday. What was yesterday's spot? 88 at end of shift. Debbie nodded once and logged Jana's verbal. 8-degree rise in under 12 hours. She moved the flashlight beam down to the pedestal base where grout met steel and steel met anchor pocket. Dust had darkened in a crescent around one corner, not the pale tan of clinker fines, but a black-brown paste that glistened in tiny pulses. She waited 2 revolutions, then 3, watching for rhythm. On every rotation there it was. A minute breath of oil-dark slurry pressing from a hairline crack and then relaxing back, as if the machine were exhaling through concrete. Evan leaned closer. That's not from housekeeping wash. There is no wash water on this deck before day shift, Debbie said, and water doesn't pulse in sync with shaft rotation. She angled the flashlight to sharpen the line. The crack ran from the outer anchor side toward the pedestal center line, thin as wire but active. Pumping meant movement. Movement at the base meant alignment geometry was no longer static, even if the coupling had been set correctly months earlier. Jana looked up. Want dye penetrant? Not with it running, Debbie said. We'll mark and trend visual growth. She took a paint marker from her pocket, drew 2 witness ticks across the crack at fixed spacing, and photographed the marks, with timestamp visible from her tablet clock and frame. Evidence first, argument second. A shudder passed through the deck as feed load stepped up from control. The coupling guard emitted a brief metallic chirp that vanished into the mill roar. Debbie froze, counted silently through the next 4 seconds, and listened for repeat. There it was again, faint and periodic under the gear mesh hiss. Not a continuous rub, intermittent contact. She lifted the vibration wand from her bag, magnet-mounted it to the bearing housing, and checked the portable readout against CMS. 1.31, then 1.32, stable enough to confirm the fixed sensor. Independent instrument matches panel, she said. Sensor isn't lying. Evan's eyes flicked toward the motor end. Could be coupling insert wear. Could be part of it, Debbie said, but insert wear does not create pedestal breathing and this temperature pattern together. We have stacked faults, not one nuisance. She stood and traced the causal chain with her finger in the air, the way she did when training apprentices. Offset plus angular misalignment shifts reaction forces. Grout voids let the foot micro-move. Micro-move pushes axial load where radial bearing should not carry thrust. Oil film collapses at the loaded zone. Metal contact elevates heat and vibration. Keep pushing speed, and tooth contact migrates to gear edge. After that, damage accelerates faster than people can argue about it. By 5:52 a.m., she had uploaded 10 photos, 2 IR captures, 1 portable vibration confirmation, and 1 audio clip of the intermittent chirp. She added a sketch overlay showing crack location relative to anchor bolts. She flagged the work order critical mechanical integrity and routed it to maintenance planning, reliability, EHS, and operations management. Procedure required those recipients. Procedure existed because memory was selective under pressure. Her radio cracked. Debbie Halverson, status. She keyed up without moving from the pedestal. Confirmed active misalignment indicators and base instability on number 3. Outboard bearing at 96 degrees Celsius localized. Vibration 1.32 RMS verified by portable. Hairline pedestal crack pumping oil contaminated dust per revolution. Recommend controlled slowdown to 62 revolutions per minute max and planned outage for laser alignment and base regrout. A short pause. Then Brent's reply, tight and dry. Recommendation received. Not accepted, received. She clipped the radio back to her vest and turned to Evan. I need one more check. Bring me the dial indicator kit. He hesitated, then jogged toward the tool cabinet. Jana stayed, arms crossed, watching the crack marks as the machine ran. You think it's grown this shift? It already moved enough to pump, Debbie said. Growth rate is what tells us how much runway is left. When Evan returned, Debbie mounted the magnetic base on a stable reference near the pedestal and set the indicator tip across the crack line to catch opening displacement under load cycles. The needle trembled with deck vibration, then settled into a pattern. Tiny oscillations, plus a repeatable jump at each rotational pass. 6 to 8 thousandths equivalent movement at peak pulse by her rough conversion. That was not a cosmetic fissure. That was the foundation participating in the fault. She called out numbers while Evan wrote on the back of a laminated checklist, then photographed the sheet and uploaded it. Cycle-correlated movement confirmed. Enter this as preliminary dynamic displacement. We validate with shutdown metrology. The hall clock above the stairwell ticked to 5:58 a.m. Dawn light had begun to push through the high windows, turning suspended dust from gray to gold, and the change made the whole platform look calmer than it was. The machine did not care about appearance. The machine cared about vectors and clearances and film thickness measured in microns. A forklift passed below carrying palletized grinding media, its backup alarm beeping in patient, indifferent rhythm. Production life continued around them. Trucks queuing, dispatch calling, conveyors turning, while a single fault stack matured inside a drivetrain everyone needed to believe was fine. Debbie felt that familiar isolation of being the person with unwelcome numbers. It never got easier. It only got more routine. Evan broke the silence first. If it trips at 1.4, why not let the trip handle it? Because trips are seatbelts, not steering, she said, and because someone under schedule pressure always thinks widening a limit is harmless. She met his eyes so he understood the sentence was training, not cynicism. Safety systems are truth sources. People can still misuse them. Jana looked toward the control room windows. You think he'll hold at 62? Debbie answered with the only thing she could defend. I gave a clear mechanism, clear threshold, clear recommendation, and documented evidence. That is my lane. She rechecked the crack marks. One witness line had blurred at the edge where oily dust kept breathing through. She took another photo at maximum zoom and tagged it, growth indication A. Then she moved to the coupling guard inspection port, opened the small viewing hatch and shined the light through the mesh. The spacer surface showed fresh fretting at one edge, a polished crescent where motion was concentrating. She captured that too and tagged it edge contact evidence. At 6:03 a.m., she climbed back to the control room with Evan and Jana. The trend display greeted her with the same red label and a slightly higher average on the last 5-minute window. 1.33 flashed, settled, then 1.32 again. Near trip, not yet over. The most dangerous zone in industrial operations was often not outright failure. It was this narrow corridor where numbers gave just enough compliance for bad judgment to claim permission. Brent ended his phone call as she stepped in. Well? She placed the tablet on the console between them, the evidence packet open with thumbnails in sequence. Thermal hotspot, pumping crack, indicator readings, coupling fretting, trend slope, independent vibration confirmation. This is no longer interpretive. We have active base movement and localized bearing distress tied to alignment error. If you run nameplate speed, you amplify axial load and edge mesh contact. The failure pathway is established. He stared at the images without touching the screen. For 2 long seconds, his expression gave nothing away. Behind him, dispatch radioed again about truck lanes and contract windows, and the operators kept their hands poised over controls as if stillness itself might prevent a decision. Debbie did not repeat herself. She had put a mechanism, measurements, and visuals in one chain no honest reviewer could break. The technical alarm was complete, visible, time-stamped, and witnessed. Whether management respected it was a separate system entirely, and she could already hear that system grinding into motion. Brent finally touched the tablet with one finger, swiped through the image stack, and set it back down as if the photos were an inconvenience instead of a warning. "You built a courtroom exhibit," he said. "What I asked for was a yes or no on production." Debbie kept her hands flat on the console edge so he could see they were steady. "You have a yes or no. No to unrestricted run." She tapped the trend window and then the IR frame. "At 62 revolutions per minute, we are already at 1.32 inches per second and 96 degrees Celsius on that outboard bearing. We are 8/100ths from trip with active base movement. If you push nameplate speed, axial load climbs, oil film thins further, and we start hammering the gear mesh at the edge. That's speculation. It's mechanism." He exhaled through his nose, slow, performative patience. "You always do this. You turn every maintenance task into a philosophical emergency." She did not raise her voice. "This is not philosophy. Offset an angular misalignment with grout voids, create a force path into a bearing that is not designed to carry sustained thrust. That bearing overheats, clearance changes, shaft motion increases, and tooth contact migrates. Once contact rides the edge, the damage rate is nonlinear. We do not get a gentle warning after that." Evan stared at the trend monitor, eyes flicking between the live value and the trip limit, like he was watching weather move toward a roof with no shelter. Jana stood by the doorway, helmet under one arm, jaw tight, neither interrupting nor leaving. The plant noise filled every gap. The broad mill roar, the fine high-frequency whine from the high-speed train, the small constant vibration from cabinet fans and fluorescent ballast. Brent leaned closer. "You're refusing my direction?" She answered without hesitation. "I am refusing to release unsafe speed on equipment I am accountable for. Put it in writing that you are overriding the recommendation, and I will countersign with findings." For the first time that morning, his expression flashed with something unguarded. Not doubt exactly, but the irritation of a man who expected compliance and got procedure. "You don't get to set terms." "Procedure sets terms," she said. "Critical integrity events require either risk reduction or formal management override with named authority and scope. The form exists because this scenario is predictable." He glanced at the operators, then back at Debbie. "Predictable? You're predicting disaster now?" "I'm documenting a failure path. There is a difference." At 6:05 a.m., dispatch came over the desk radio again, clipped and urgent. Mill control, confirm wave alpha and beta loads by 700. Contract penalty triggers at 1200 if cumulative shortfall exceeds threshold. Evan acknowledged automatically, voice thin. Brent seized on it like evidence from a friendly witness. Listen to that, he said. Real consequence, real contracts, real people's jobs tied to throughput. Debbie turned toward the radio, then back to him. I heard it. Penalty language doesn't change bearing physics. He gave a short, humorless smile. That sentence should go on your office wall. She held his gaze. That sentence kept people alive in every plant I've worked. He straightened and crossed his arms. Let's simplify this so everyone here is clear. I am issuing a direct order. Clear number 3 for standard production ramp. She shook her head once. I cannot authorize standard ramp. Maximum safe temporary limit is 62 revolutions per minute, pending alignment and base repair. The room seemed to tighten around that exchange. No one spoke. Even the printer in the corner, usually spitting tickets every few minutes, stayed silent. Brent stepped to the side terminal, opened the operations log, and typed with sharp, stabbing keystrokes. Then he turned the screen so she could see. Direction, resume standard production. Under that, a blank for mechanical concurrence. Sign, he said. Debbie read it, then took the keyboard and added a single line under his entry. Mechanical concurrence withheld. Unsafe condition verified. Elevated vibration. Localized bearing overheating. Dynamic pedestal crack movement. Coupling edge fretting. Recommended max 62 revolutions per minute and immediate planned outage. She entered her badge ID and timestamp, 6:07. Brent watched her finish and laughed once, low and incredulous. You're writing your own defense statement in real time. I'm writing the record. Same thing. She clicked save and stepped back. Record protects everyone who told the truth when it mattered. He grabbed the phone, punched a 3-digit internal line, and waited. Control admin, I need maintenance planner and shift superintendent on conference now. No, now. He set the receiver down without hanging up and turned to Debbie again. You think this plant runs on one specialist's veto. It doesn't. She spoke just as calmly as she had at the pedestal, but now the edge in her words was visible. This is not veto power. It is stop work recommendation under Mechanical Integrity Protocol, code MI4. You can override it only by accepting liability and documenting deviation controls. If you bypass trip safeguards, that deviation becomes intentional. His eyes narrowed. Are you threatening me? I am describing the chain investigators follow after an incident. By 6:10 a.m., the conference speaker sat in the middle of the console desk, green light on, with planning and shift supervision patched in from offices 2 floors away. Brent gave his summary first, stripped to schedule language. Debbie is blocking standard production on number 3 over alignment concerns. We are already behind. I need concurrence to run. Then he nodded at her with theatrical restraint. Your turn. Debbie did not waste words. Number 3, train shows, active coupling, drift alarm, outboard, gearbox, bearing vibration at 1.32 inches per second, RMS with trip at 1.4, localized temperature 96 degrees Celsius, and dynamic pedestal crack movement pumping oil-contaminated dust every revolution. Portable instrument confirms fixed sensor. Visual evidence shows fresh coupling edge fretting. Failure pathway is misalignment plus unstable base causing axial load into a radial bearing. then lubrication film collapse, then escalating shaft motion and edge tooth loading. Recommendation remains: hold 62 revolutions per minute max, plan immediate outage for laser alignment and base regrout. Silence on the speaker lasted long enough to hear the mill note rise and settle again under feed fluctuation. Then the planner's voice came through, cautious and dry. "Debbie, can condition be managed one shift with enhanced monitoring?" "It is being managed at 62 right now," she said. "Not at standard rate. One shift at increased speed is not controlled risk. It is accelerated degradation." Shift Superintendent Carla Vance came on next, careful with every word. "Brent, if mechanical concurrence is withheld, we need signed management override and mitigation list at minimum." Brent's answer was immediate. "Done, I'll sign." Carla paused. "Mitigations cannot be cosmetic." "They won't be," he said, and ended the call before anyone could press further. He put the phone down, then looked directly at Debbie. "You got your paperwork, I got my authority. We are running." She picked up her tablet and opened the stop work form she had already drafted. "Then I'm entering formal refusal to release above 62 and escalating to EHS, per protocol." His voice hardened. "Do that and don't expect to stay on this floor." "I expected that the moment you called data obsolete." She completed the form and hit submit. The confirmation banner appeared with a case number. She read it aloud so the room would hear it and remember. "Stop work recommendation SWR 30612 filed 612. Witnesses Evan Ruiz and Jana Pritchard. Management override pending." Brent stared at her for 2 beats, then switched from institutional language to personal attack with practiced speed. "You know what this really is? You are afraid to make decisions unless a manual hugs you." She did not blink. "Manuals are condensed incident history. They are written because someone already paid the tuition. Spare me the sermon. Then stop asking for permission to gamble with a drivetrain." His jaw flexed. "You're done here." She tilted her head a fraction. "Clarify." "I said you're done on number 3. He pointed toward the stairwell. "Effective now, you are reassigned to silo transfer support. You'll babysit conveyors and level sensors for the rest of shift. Lower stakes, fewer excuses." Jana inhaled sharply but said nothing. Evan looked down at his control pad as if it had suddenly become urgent. Debbie answered with procedural precision. "Reassignment acknowledged. I need it entered in shift log with reason code." Brent gave her a look of open contempt. Reason code too expensive to be this scared. She let the insult pass without visible reaction and held out the tablet. "Say that on record." He ignored the tablet, keyed the radio, and called dispatch. "Send Malik Dorsey to number 3 control now. Relief operator assignment under my direct supervision." Debbie felt a cold, familiar drop in her chest. Not because she doubted Malik's effort, but because she knew the pattern. Isolate the dissenter. Replace with someone newer. Frame obedience as professionalism. She keyed her own radio on a separate channel and called the floor office. "Maintenance coordinator, this is Thompson. Confirm receipt of SWR 30612 and management override notification." A crackle, then. "Received and logged. EHS copied." "Thank you," she said and clipped the radio back to her vest. Brent heard enough to understand what she had done. "You really think filing forms will save you when this shift misses tonnage?" "Forms save facts," she said. "Facts save people who told the truth." At 6:17 a.m., Malik arrived at the control room door, helmet strap loose, from a run up the stairs, eyes moving quickly from Brent to Debbie to the red CMS tile on screen. He was 24, earnest, smart, and still knew enough to believe every conflict had a right answer if he worked hard enough. Brent motioned him in. "You're on number 3. Standard ramp plan." Malik hesitated. "I thought Debbie was lead on this train." "Not anymore." Malik looked at Debbie directly. "Is there a restriction?" She answered before Brent could cut across her. "Yes. Mechanical recommendation is 62 revolutions per minute max until alignment and base repairs are completed. Evidence is in SWR 30612 and condition packet." Brent snapped. "That recommendation has been overruled. You take direction from me." Malik swallowed. "Understood, sir." Debbie stepped to the side terminal and pulled up the handover checklist. She pointed to each line as she spoke, giving him the exact information he would need, whether management liked it or not. Outboard vibration trend sits 1.32 to 1.33, trip at 1.4 unless changed. Bearing temperature localized high. Latest IR 96 degrees Celsius. Pedestal crack marked on deck. Witness ticks photographed. Intermittent coupling chirp every few seconds under load changes. If vibration slope steepens, do not chase it with speed. Reduce load and call maintenance immediately. Brent cut in. "Ignore editorial. Follow production curve." Debbie turned to Malik again, voice still level. "Safety systems are not editorial. If anyone asks you to widen trip thresholds, request written deviation authority, and copy EHS." Malik's eyes flicked toward Brent, then back. "Copy." Brent stepped between them enough to reassert hierarchy without touching either of them. "Debbie, you are relieved from this station now." She nodded once, gathered her IR camera, portable wand, and notes, then paused long enough to enter one final log line. Reassigned by Ops Manager B. Halverson at 6:21. Number 3 handed to Relief Operator M. Dorsey under direct management order. Mechanical restrictions not concurred. She read the line back under her breath for accuracy, saved it, and locked the entry with her badge. As she moved toward the door, Brent delivered the threat he had been shaping all morning. "If you keep undermining operations, I will initiate insubordination review before end of day. Do you understand me?" She stopped at the threshold and turned just enough to face him square. "I understand exactly. I also understand that insubordination review has less force than a failed bearing with no oil film." His mouth tightened. "Get off the floor." She gave him the response he had demanded hours earlier, stripped of heat and stripped of fear. "I am doing my job." Then she walked down the graded stairs toward silo transfer, carrying a tablet full of timestamps and a stomach full of dread. While behind her, the number 3 trend line pulsed red on the control room screen, and a younger operator settled into a chair that had just become much heavier than it looked. Debbie reached the silo transfer landing and forced herself to match her breathing to the conveyor rhythm. 4 counts in, 4 counts out, while dust drifted under the catwalk lights and the plant carried on as if a single reassignment could neutralize a mechanical fact. The transfer panel here was older, a steel cabinet with stiff selector switches and a cracked mimic diagram, and she could have run it in her sleep. Start sequence, gate confirmation, bin level interlock, belt permissive, choke check. Hands did the work automatically while her attention kept sliding back to the tablet clipped against her forearm, where the mirrored number 3 condition screen refreshed every few seconds in hard red and amber. She had left the chair. She had not left the problem. At 6:24 a.m., the radio on her vest snapped alive with Brent's voice from main control, flat and brisk. Number 3, commence ramp profile Bravo. Target 74 revolutions per minute. Confirm override package in place. Malik answered after a short pause. Number 3 copy, ramp profile Bravo to 74. Confirming override package. Debbie closed her eyes for half a second, then keyed up on operations channel. Control Thompson Mechanical repeats recommendation, hold at 62 maximum. Vibration trend is already at threshold margin. Request reconsideration before ramp. Brent came back immediately, louder than needed. Recommendation noted, continue assigned duties. No argument left to make in that moment would move him, so she logged the exchange instead. 6:24:32. Final advisory transmitted prior to commanded ramp. She added the channel ID and saved it. Process memory. Not revenge, not theater, not panic. Memory. 8 seconds later, the live speed tag rose from 62.0 to 63.5 revolutions per minute. Vibration climbed from 1.33 to 1.34 inches per second RMS and settled high. Another 8 seconds. 65.1 revolutions per minute. Axial component widened. Another 8 seconds. 66.8 revolutions per minute. Temperature ticked from 96.0 degrees Celsius to 96.7 degrees Celsius. She watched each step like a countdown no one else could hear, and felt the same hollow pressure she had felt once before in a lime plant, when a supervisor overrode a thrust alarm to finish a weekend order. That one had ended with a seized journal and 6 weeks of outage. This trend looked worse. A forklift horn sounded twice below her station. A loader operator waved up for gate confirmation, and Debbie answered with a hand signal, checked the silo level, and opened transfer path C. Work did not pause for dread. That was one of the crueler rules in heavy industry. You could be right about a looming failure and still be expected to keep tonnage moving somewhere else. At 6:27 a.m., the number 3 value hit 1.36. Still below trip, still compliant on paper. Brent knew how to live inside those narrow margins and call it leadership. Her radio clicked again. Evan this time, voice careful. Thompson, this is Ruiz on side channel. We just applied temporary shutdown delay extension. 1 shift authorization signed by Halverson. She stopped with her hand on a belt stop mushroom and stared at the tablet screen until the numbers sharpened. Say again, she said, though she had heard him perfectly. Trip delay extension. Vibration shutdown widened by 0.2 and delay timer increased. He signed it. Debbie keyed back. Copy. Send me the authorization image and signatory list. 10 seconds later, Evan texted a photo. Override form with Brent's badge number. Handwritten note reading temporary production protection. Validity 1 shift. Mitigation field was nearly blank. Spot checks only. She looked at the form, then at the moving trend, then at the cracked grout photo she had taken less than an hour earlier. A clear chain sat in her hands, and the chain was being pulled harder on purpose. At 6:30 a.m., she called EHS duty through internal extension, speaker pressed to one ear while conveyors rattled behind her. This is Debbie Thompson, rotating equipment. I need verbal acknowledgement of active override on critical vibration shutdown for number 3 under documented mechanical non-concurrence. The duty officer, fatigued but alert, answered, "Acknowledged. Email the form image and your advisory logs. We'll tag for review." "Review won't prevent failure," she said. A beat of silence then. "Understood. Send anyway." She did. Attachment, timestamp, distribution list, external contact made and logged. Then she returned to the transfer cabinet and cleared a minor choke alarm at Silo 2, because the plant demanded two truths at once: imminent danger in one system, routine obligations in another. By 6:38 a.m., number 3 reached 71 revolutions per minute. Vibration crossed 1.40 for 2 seconds, dropped to 1.39, climbed to 1.41, and held without tripping, because the delay extension absorbed what should have been a hard stop. Debbie felt her molars clench. The safety system had spoken. Management had put cotton in its mouth. She keyed the radio again, voice clipped to pure mechanism. "Control Thompson, you just crossed former trip threshold. Repeat, crossed former trip threshold. Recommend immediate reduction to 62 and controlled unload." Mullick answered first, breathing audible through the mic. "Copy, Thompson." Then Brent overrode him on the same channel. "Copy received. Continue run." The words were clean and bureaucratic and carried more danger than shouting. At 6:41 a.m., speed hit 74 revolutions per minute. The trend climbed in jagged plateaus: 1.42, 1.44, 1.43, 1.45. Temperature crept to 98.1 degrees Celsius. Spectral sidebands on her remote view thickened into a fuzzy comb around running speed, textbook looseness and misalignment interaction. Debbie opened a voice memo and described what she saw in real time, so there would be no later claim that the pattern appeared only in hindsight. The next 3 hours were a long, mechanical argument between force and denial. No immediate collapse came to reward her warning or punish Brent's order. The train stayed alive, wounded and loud, while operators normalized red numbers by staring at them long enough. That was how bad practice rooted itself. Not through one dramatic lie, but through repeated survival at the edge. By the middle of the afternoon, heat shimmered over the yard asphalt and dust stuck to sweat under everyone's collars. Debbie was still on silo transfer assignment when Evan sent another quiet update. He wants same profile on night restart after feed interruption. Peak load target to make backlog. She read it twice, then typed back one line. "Do not start at peak load with current condition. Log this message." Evan replied with a single word: "Logged." At 7:12 p.m., second shift handed off to nights. Debbie should have been driving home, but she stayed in the site trailer finishing an incident packet because she no longer trusted that anyone in authority would preserve sequence accurately. Outside, haul trucks cycled through scale lanes in sodium light. Inside, she organized files: IR captures, vibration overlays, override authorization image, radio transcript snippets, pedestal crack photos with witness marks. Physical evidence had to survive personalities. At 7:46 p.m., her phone lit with a call from Jana. No greeting, just urgency. They're staging a restart on number 3 under peak feed. Mullick's still in the chair. Brent is on the floor. Debbie was already on her feet. "I'm heading to control." She crossed the corridor at a jog, steel doors banging behind her, boots striking concrete in hard echoes. Near the control room, she keyed her radio one last time before entering. Control Thompson, final advisory. Do not restart number 3 at peak load. Bring up at restricted speed only or hold for maintenance. Brent's voice answered from inside, almost conversational. Copy. Continue run plan. She reached the window outside control and saw them through the glass. Malik at the console, shoulders rigid. Brent behind him with one hand on the chair back, tie loosened. Hard hat too clean for the deck dust. Evan at the side station, not sitting, eyes fixed on the trend panel like he wanted to look away and could not. Debbie stayed outside the room because she had been formally removed from authority. But she kept the radio hot and the stopwatch app open on her phone. If they were going to do this, she would track every second. Ramp command issued, Malik said over channel at 7:49:10 p.m. Debbie tapped start. For the first 20 seconds, the train sounded merely rough. A deep growl with a high metallic rasp braided through it. At 32 seconds, the rasp sharpened into a thin, rising whine that carried through the wall and into the corridor. At 45 seconds, the gearbox emitted a howl so bright and violent in tone that even 2 closed doors could not blunt it. A steel scream that cut through conveyor rumble, fan noise, radio chatter, all of it. Debbie felt it in her sternum, not just her ears. Abort ramp, she transmitted. Abort now. No response from Brent. Malik's voice came, strained, vibration spiking. Then, 12 seconds later, a crack like a heavy rifle shot detonated from inside the enclosure, followed by a rapid metallic flail that sounded like chain striking sheet steel at high speed. The coupling spacer had fractured, rotational continuity was gone, and the train no longer had a stable centerline. It had become mass and momentum with no discipline. 3 seconds after that, a second impact hit, lower and wetter in sound, then a hiss that became a roar. The whipping shaft sheared a lube line. Atomized oil blasted into hot, dust-laden air inside the housing, and ignition came as a blunt orange-white flash that punched against the enclosure seams and slammed both access doors outward against their stops. The pressure wave reached the corridor as a hard chest thump and a rush of heat. Overhead, lights flickered once, twice, then held on dim backup. Smoke rolled out in a dense gray-black sheet, carrying burnt oil smell, hot metal, and clinker dust. Visibility dropped to a few meters within seconds. Alarm horns engaged in staggered sequence. Fire suppression pre-alert, then high-priority evacuation tone, then the repetitive voice message ordering personnel to muster points. Sprinkler deluge in the drive bay kicked in with a hammering surge. Inside the room, someone shouted, "Man down at number 3 station." Debbie pulled her emergency respirator hood from the wall box, yanked it over her head, and pushed through the door into smoke and alarm light. The floor was slick underfoot, where suppression water and oil mixed into dark runoff. She stayed low and moved by landmarks she knew by memory. The left console edge, the breaker cabinet corner, the painted column at Bay 3. She found Malik near the operator chair, curled on his side with his left arm pinned awkwardly beneath him and blistering heat marks across one forearm where he had thrown up a sleeve to shield his face. He was conscious, gasping, trying to stand and failing. "Don't move your wrist," she said, kneeling beside him. "I've got you." "My hand," he said, voice shaking. "I heard it go." "I know. Stay with me." She keyed her radio to emergency net. Medical response to number 3 control. 1 injured, probable wrist fracture and thermal burns. Conscious and breathing. Fire active in gearbox enclosure, suppression flowing. Jana appeared through the smoke with a trauma kit and an extinguisher crew behind her. Together they stabilized Malik's arm with a padded splint, covered the burn areas with sterile dressings, and moved him on a backboard clear of the bay, while Fire Team isolated energy and verified suppression boundaries. Brent emerged last from the haze, coughing hard, face ash gray under soot streaks, one sleeve scorched at the cuff. He looked at the shattered enclosure window, then at the trending screen, still frozen on a vertical spike. And for the first time that day, he had no language ready. Debbie did not speak to him. She stayed with Malik until medics took over, gave concise handoff details, and watched them roll him toward the ambulance dock under rotating red light. Behind her, number 3 was silent except for residual hiss from cooling metal and sprinkler runoff hitting hot casing. The line that had run every day now sat dark, split open, and stinking of burnt oil and preventable math. The line stayed dark, split open, and stinking of burnt oil and preventable math. And Debbie kept her hand on Malik's shoulder until the stretcher cleared the bay door and disappeared into the ambulance light. Only then did she stand fully, pull off the respirator hood, and look back at number 3 through the thinning smoke. The coupling guard hung twisted on one side. One enclosure door had bowed outward at the hinges. Suppression water streamed off the gearbox casing in black ribbons that pooled in the trench drain and carried metallic grit with it. The high whine that had ruled that corner of the hall for years was gone. In its place sat a broad, unnatural silence, broken only by alarm pulses and boot steps. "Accountability check at Muster B," Carla Vance called over the emergency channel. "All departments respond by name and head count." Debbie keyed in from the corridor. "Reliability, Thompson. 1 present." Around her, voices stacked in sequence: production, electrical, mechanics, contractors, security. Nobody was missing. 1 serious injury, no fatalities. That number mattered, and it did not soften anything else. By 8:03 p.m., the incident command board was up in the floor office, and Brent stood at the edge of the room with soot on his collar and both hands flat on a table full of printouts. He had stopped performing confidence. Carla ran the first formal briefing from the center seat, reading from procedure with the same blunt cadence Debbie used for vibration thresholds. "Immediate status," Carla said. "Number 3 finish mill train is locked out and isolated, fire suppression activated as designed. 1 operator transported for wrist fracture and thermal burns. No lost personnel. We preserve scene integrity from this point. No unauthorized cleanup, no part movement, no edits to logs." She looked directly at Debbie. "You have pre-incident condition records?" Debbie slid a rugged case onto the table and opened it. "Yes. CMS exports, portable vibration verification, infrared captures crack witness marks, radio logs, stop work submission, and management override image." "Chain of custody starts now," Carla said. She handed the evidence envelope to security lead Thomas Hale, who signed, dated, and sealed each storage drive with numbered tags. That was the first contact from earlier resolved in front of everyone. EHS had asked for the files, and now they were in custody, immutable. Brent finally spoke, voice rough from smoke. "Can we stabilize language until root cause is verified?" Debbie did not answer him. Carla did. "We are using factual language. Root cause is a process. Scene facts are not optional." At 8:27 p.m., the on-call physician phoned in through medical liaison. Malik was stable, alert, and headed to imaging with a confirmed distal radius fracture and partial thickness burns on 1 forearm and neck area. He would keep function in his hand, but recovery would take months, not days. Debbie leaned back against a cinder block wall when she heard that and let out one breath she had been holding since the corridor flash. Injury counted in decimals too, she thought. Not dead did not mean unhurt. Earlier that first night by 11:30 p.m., the first mechanical walk-down under permit began. Debbie joined from reliability with 2 maintenance supervisors, 1 electrical engineer, and an external fire investigator. They moved slowly, lights in hand, documenting before touching anything. The coupling spacer had fractured along a fretted band near one bolt circle. The high-speed shaft showed whip marks and lateral strike damage inside the guard. The sheared lube line sat peeled at the fitting. Gearbox oil was contaminated with fine metallic debris, visible in the sample bottle even before lab analysis. At the pedestal, Debbie's paint witness marks were no longer aligned. One side had shifted several millimeters, and the hairline crack had opened into a jagged seam. She looked at the crack. Then she looked at Carla. No words were needed for that particular setup anymore. At 1:12 a.m., they pulled preliminary event timing from the control historian and synced it to radio recordings. Ramp command at 1949:10. Acoustic anomaly spike at 1949:55. Vibration surge beyond former trip set point persisted under delay extension. Coupling fracture at 1950:07. Lube pressure collapse immediately after. Fire detection and suppression trigger inside design window. The chain read like a textbook case written by a machine that didn't care about status titles. 3 days passed before she heard Malik's own voice on speaker, patched into a welfare call from occupational health. He sounded medicated and embarrassed and angry in equal measure. "I should have pushed harder on the ramp." Debbie kept her tone even. "You logged objections. That matters. Heal first, reports later." The next morning, insurer representatives arrived with 2 forensic consultants and a reservation of rights specialist. They requested maintenance deferment history, override approvals, alarm set point changes, and all communication related to SWR 30612. Debbie recognized the phrase reservation of rights from prior claims. It meant payment was now conditional, and conditional usually meant contested. Brent sat through that meeting in a clean shirt and said very little. At 10:40 a.m., OSHA opened a formal inspection under hospitalization criteria. Their lead officer asked for lockout logs, management of change forms, trip limit governance, and training records for relief operators. Debbie provided what reliability owned and directed the rest to compliance. The officer's questions were narrow and surgical. Who authorized deviation? What mitigation controls were active? Why was a critical shutdown delay expanded under known distress? Answers were recorded verbatim. A week later, the delayed consequence that had been accumulating quietly moved from rumor to legal paper. Quality assurance flagged 3 ready-mix clients for premature cracking complaints tied to cement delivered during the 11-day unstable run window before the fire. Grind profile variability and thermal excursions had altered fineness consistency enough to trigger performance disputes and field pours. Legal hold notices arrived by courier and email within the same afternoon. Preserve lab notebooks, preserve dispatch records, preserve blend data. Do not delete messages. Dispatch, which had once pushed only tonnage urgency, now sent a different kind of radio traffic. Client account Delta requesting immediate executive response. Contractual remedy language referenced. External contact number 2 resolved in the harshest way. Those penalty clocks Brent had cited were real, and now they were counting against the plant from the other side of the table. By the second week after the fire, the accounting team published the first consolidated loss sheet. Debbie read it in the reliability office at 6:15 a.m., coffee untouched beside her keyboard. Direct rebuild estimate for number 3 sat at $9.0 million. Replacement gearbox, motor rewind, and requalification at 6.6 kilovolts. Foundation demolition and repour. New grout cure cycle. Laser alignment services. Coupling replacement. Controls recertification and commissioning support. Outage duration projection was 47 days, if no long lead slippage occurred. Production loss estimate added $6.4 million based on reduced output and purchased supplemental cement to meet surviving contracts. 2 annual clients had already issued termination notices. There was dark irony in the line item detail. The deferred alignment and regroup package was still in the archive at $56,000. At day 16, the insurer issued its formal reservation letter, then a partial denial notice 3 days later for major portions of property damage and business interruption. The language was clinical and devastating. Intentional deferment of critical maintenance against OEM interval, documented mechanical non-concurrence, and unauthorized suppression or widening of protective trip response materially increased loss severity. In plain terms, coverage would not absorb management decisions that overrode the system designed to prevent exactly this event. Carla read the denial summary aloud in executive review, while finance stared at the screen and stopped asking whether the claim could smooth out quarter impact. There was no smoothing left. OSHA citations landed in parallel before the month closed. Lockout governance deficiencies tied to post-override control assumptions, inadequate management of change documentation for a temporary trip modification, and supervisory conduct findings related to pressure against a documented safety recommendation. None of that language used the word arrogance. It did not have to. Debbie's own position was reviewed too, as policy required for all involved personnel. HR and legal interviewed her twice, once on chronology and once on authority boundaries. She brought no speeches, only timestamps. 5:41 alarm context. 6:12 stop work filing. 6:24 final advisory before ramp. 1949 restart warning. Every external contact she made had an outcome now attached. HS receipt confirmed. Coordinator log confirmed. Side channel message retained. Emergency call recording archived. Nothing hung loose. In the third week, the board-appointed forensic team issued an interim cause map that connected each ignored warning to each subsequent failure mechanism in a linear chain. Misalignment indicators identified. Base instability visually and dynamically confirmed. Run rate increase under known distress. Protective threshold altered. Distress acceleration under load. Mechanical fracture lube release. Ignition in dust-laden environment. Injury and asset loss. The report's starkness gave Debbie a grim kind of relief. No myth-making, no scapegoat engineering, no suggestion that the event had come from nowhere. During rebuild demolition, they cut out the failed pedestal and found voided grout pockets under one corner consistent with long-term support loss. Lab analysis of gearbox oil showed elevated wear metals predating the incident spike. Coupling fracture surfaces exhibited progressive fretting before final overload. Distinctive details from her earliest notes, the pumping crack, the intermittent chirp, the edge fretting crescent, were all theorized, tested, and confirmed in sequence. Even the operators who had looked away from her tablet at dawn stopped disputing what the machine had been saying. By day 31 of outage, procurement flagged another systemic cost. Expedited component freight, specialist labor premiums, and contract penalties for delayed shipments had started to outpace initial projections. The spreadsheet that once rejected a $56,000 shutdown window now carried red cells across 4 departments: operations, legal, quality, and finance. Small savings, massive loss. The plant did not need a slogan, it had invoices. Maluk returned for a brief modified duty visit in a brace at day 39, mostly paperwork and rehab coordination. He stood with Debbie at the viewing window while contractors set rebar in the new foundation block. "I keep hearing that howl," he said quietly. "So do I," Debbie answered. "Use it. That sound is what procedures are for." When commissioning finally started on day 47, number 3 came back under a different rule set. Any critical alignment window now auto-locked into schedule with no managerial override authority. Protective trip changes require dual sign-off from reliability and EHS plus written temporary hazard analysis. Relief operators received mandatory escalation training that explicitly protected refusal rights under documented mechanical non-concurrence. Those were policy outcomes, not consolation prizes. Following the corrective action hearings, Brent Halverson was removed from operational authority and terminated for cause under safety governance provisions tied to the override and trip delay decisions. Debbie Thompson was placed under formal non-retaliation protection and advanced into plant-level reliability sign-off authority for critical run/stop concurrence. The reckoning closed on paper before it closed in people. Total direct rebuild, $9.0 million. Output and market loss, $6.4 million. 1 injured operator with months of recovery. 2 contracts gone. Major insurance recovery denied. Regulatory citations issued. Legal claims active from customers and employee counsel. All of it traceable to a decision framework that treated safeguards as negotiable and expertise as obstruction. At the end of that week, Debbie stayed late in the reliability office and reviewed the final incident ledger once more before filing it to the plant archive. She checked that every evidence item had disposition. Every external report had a response. Every flagged anomaly had a verified explanation. Nothing abandoned, nothing rewritten. The machine had failed exactly along the path she had named, and the institution had paid exactly along the path it had chosen. Physics had kept its side of the contract. Management had broken theirs. Management had broken theirs. And Debbie sat with that sentence on the screen until the cursor stopped blinking and the office HVAC clicked over to night setback. At 6:58 p.m., she printed the final incident ledger, signed the footer in blue ink, and carried the packet down to security records. Thomas Hale met her at the counter with the same evidence log he had opened on the fire night. Every tamper seal listed by number. Every drive tagged to a custody handoff. He slid the form between them and tapped each line as he spoke. Photos from pedestal crack marks, disposition, forensic copy complete, originals in legal hold vault, IR captures same, portable vibration wand export same, Radio transcript pulls same. Override authorization image, preserved and hashed. Nothing missing. Debbie checked each box initialed and watched him lock the envelope into drawer C17. Physical evidence thread closed, documented, and no longer vulnerable to memory. At 7:11 p.m., her desk phone rang before she made it back upstairs. EHS duty officer Lena Carver, the same voice that had told her to send files even if review would not stop failure, came on with a calm that sounded earned. "I'm calling with closure status on SWR 30612 and the override alert you sent at 6:30. Both reports are now classified substantiated, and both are attached to Permanent Corrective Action C APA-19-RM. I need verbal confirmation you received this for your own records." Debbie leaned against the corridor window, looking down at the dark number 3 bay behind lockout chains and scaffold. "Received," she said. "Thank you for calling it directly." Lena paused a beat. "You did what the system was built for. We failed to support it in real time. That part is on leadership, not on you." The board hearing convened at 8 o'clock the next morning in the training room. Fluorescent lights too bright for a conversation no one wanted. Brent sat at the far end in a white shirt and no tie. Legal counsel beside him. A stack of printouts squared to the table edge, as if neat paper could narrow causality. Carla chaired. Finance, compliance, legal, EHS, and the forensic lead attended in person. Debbie's role was witness, not accuser. She was sworn in, read the chronology from timestamps, and answered only what she was asked. "Did you advise a speed limit?" "Yes, 62 revolutions per minute maximum." "Did management direct higher speed?" "Yes." "Were protective thresholds modified?" "Yes, delay extension and effective widening under one-shift override." Brent stared at the tabletop during that exchange, and when counsel asked if any warning had been ambiguous, Carla slid a monitor toward the board, showing Debbie's exact line from 0603. "If you run nameplate speed, you amplify axial load and edge mesh contact." The forensic lead said, flat and unadorned, "There is no ambiguity in mechanism or consequence chain." By 9:42 a.m., the hearing reached sanctions. Legal read the policy language first. Intentional override of critical safeguards under documented non-concurrence, retaliatory reassignment pressure, and procedural breach in management of change controls. Then Carla looked at Brent directly. "Your authority is revoked effective immediately. Employment terminated for cause. Bonus forfeited. Access deactivated at 10 o'clock. Brent finally raised his head. "You're making me the whole story." Carla did not flinch. "No, physics made the story. You signed the override." Security waited by the door while he gathered his folder and badge. He left without another sentence, and the room stayed silent for several seconds after the latch clicked. Not out of sympathy, but because everyone could hear how ordinary the ending sounded when arrogance finally met a procedure with teeth. At 10:17 a.m., while the hearing notes were still warm from the printer, Debbie received the insurer callback that had been pending since reservation of rights. A claims attorney and a plant counsel joined by speakerphone. The attorney read formal position. Major portions denied. Limited safety system restoration covered. All enhanced loss categories excluded due to intentional deferment and unauthorized protective suppression. Plant counsel muted, swore under his breath once, then unmuted and asked about appeal windows. "You may appeal," the attorney said, but your own logs are the strongest evidence in this file." Debbie heard the line and wrote it down. External contact resolved. Final outcome aligned with every warning she had logged before dawn on day 1. Just after lunch, OSHA's closing conference took place in the old lab classroom, with dust still trapped in the window seals from years of clinker traffic. The compliance officer placed 3 citation packets on the table and read each category with date, code, and required abatement milestones. When he finished, he turned to Debbie and asked one final factual question. "Did anyone instruct you to retract your mechanical non-concurrence?" "No," she said. "They bypassed it instead." He nodded, wrote one line, and closed his notebook. "For the record, your refusal and escalation were appropriate." That sentence mattered less for pride than for precedent. In the next conflict, another operator would have a federal line to point to, not just a memory of who won the argument. By the first Monday of the next month, the rebuilt number 3 sat on a new foundation block. Grout cured, laser reports signed, coupling faces true within thousandths, and trip settings restored under locked governance. Debbie stood at the front of the control room for mandatory restart training with Evan, Jana, Malik in a wrist brace, and 19 other operators and supervisors. She held up 2 laminated pages. The old one-shift override form with blank mitigation fields, and the new critical integrity permit requiring reliability and EHS dual approval, plus automatic executive notification. "This is the difference between theater and control," she said. "Old form let one person borrow safety from tomorrow. New form makes that structurally unavailable." She clicked to a slide with the event timeline in seconds. 45 seconds to howl, 12 to fracture, 3 to fire. No one looked away. When the room broke for 10 minutes, Evan stayed behind at the console and finally paid off the look he had carried since dawn in part 1, the one that had always stopped short of speech. "I should have pushed the stop when he ordered the delay extension," he said, not looking at her. "I told myself I was just the panel operator. That was cowardice with a job title." Debbie set her coffee down and answered without softness and without blame. "It was fear inside a hierarchy. Name it correctly, then change behavior. Next time, if mechanical withholds concurrence, you freeze the ramp and call EHS live. You don't ask permission to obey the interlock." He nodded once, hard, and signed the updated refusal rights acknowledgement before returning to his station. Jonna caught Debbie in the corridor after that and paid off her own unfinished reaction from the morning reassignment, the inhale she had swallowed instead of objecting. "When he said too expensive to be this scared, I wanted to speak and didn't. I regret that." Debbie adjusted the stack of training binders in her arms. "You spoke where it counted, on deck measurements, injury response, and witness statement. Regret is only useful if it edits the next decision." Jonna gave a short, grim smile. "Then the next one gets a louder answer." That was enough. At 3:05 p.m., Malik signed his return-to-work plan in occupational health and asked Debbie to walk with him to the number 3 viewing window. His brace rested against the rail. His skin graft dressings were gone, leaving pink new tissue that would keep its own weather map for years. "I keep replaying the order in my copy," he said. Debbie stood beside him, looking at the coupling through clean guard mesh. "Then replay the full tape," she said. "You logged concerns. You called the spike. You got hurt because management forced a known failure path. Accountability follows authority, not just proximity." He exhaled slowly, then tapped the updated console placard that now read, "Critical mechanical non-concurrence equals automatic hold. This sign exists because you refuse to pretend. I won't forget that." At 4:20 p.m., legal held the final customer claims briefing in Conference B. Quality specialists presented grind profile deviations from the 11-day unstable run, exactly tied to thermal excursions and fineness swings. 2 clients had terminated and settled under contract clauses. 1 client accepted remediation pricing after independent lab confirmation. Civil negligence claims tied to Malik's injury moved into insurer-independent mediation because of the partial denial. Every external report now had an endpoint on record. Every phone call had turned into either settlement, citation, or policy. No dangling threads remained, only invoices and signatures. The board's written resolution arrived at 5:02 p.m. by certified internal memo, and Carla read it aloud in the operations huddle so no one could claim they never saw it. Effective immediately, managerial override authority for critical alignment windows is abolished. Reliability concurrence is binding absent emergency life safety conditions unrelated to production target. Any retaliatory reassignment tied to safety refusal is chargeable misconduct. Then she looked toward Debbie in full view of the floor crew. Debbie Thompson is appointed reliability lead for rotating systems and retains independent stop work authority. No applause followed. This was a cement plant, not a ceremony. But shoulders shifted, eyes met, and the hierarchy line moved a few inches toward reality. At 6:10 p.m., Debbie walked the number 3 deck one last time before handoff. Boots sounding hollow on fresh grout around the pedestal that had once breathed oil-dark dust. She paused where her paint witness marks used to be and touched the new concrete with 2 knuckles. The strange details that had started the fight. The pulsing crack. The intermittent chirp. The edge fretting crescent. The red trend creep at 8-second steps. Were all archived, analyzed, and closed in formal findings. Even the people who had offered loaded silence had either spoken or been recorded as never speaking. The plant had done the one thing institutions rarely do without force. It admitted sequence. She returned to the control room at 6:22 p.m. for controlled restart verification. "Number 3 ready for low-load validation," Malik said from the chair, steady this time. Debbie checked the alignment certs, the oil pressure curve, the restored trip set point, and the interlock lock file status. Then she gave the authorization Brent had demanded months earlier and never earned. "Proceed to 62 for baseline, hold, trend for 10 minutes. The machine came up smooth, no metallic chirp, no axial smear, no heat sprint. Vibration settled where it belonged, predictable, boring, safe. At 6:39 p.m., she signed the final line in the case file and sent it to archive. Deferred alignment estimate $56,000. Actual rebuild and direct outage burden $9 million plus legal and reputational loss. Root cause: management override of known critical condition. Corrective verdict: physics outranks hierarchy, permanently encoded in plant governance. She shut the folder, clipped her pen to her vest, and stepped out onto the catwalk while evening dust turned gold in the slant light. The lesson was no longer a warning from one specialist. It was policy, scar tissue, and operating law. He deferred $56,000 to protect schedule optics, and reality returned the invoice in millions.